What's up guys, how are y'all doing today? So the Lucid reveal happened last night and it was actually incredible. I loved it, I loved the car, and there's a lot to talk about. So basically, let's get right into it, and before we get started, of course, like and subscribe as that greatly helps out the channel, and let's get right into it. Alright, so the Lucid Air is going to come in 3 different models. One is going to be the Air Dream Edition. Then there's going to be the Air Grand Touring and then the Air Touring. And I think there's also going to be a cheaper version of all of them, which is just going to be simply called the Air. Now, the Air Dream Edition has about 503 miles of range. That's what's actually predicted, and it's going to come out literally in the spring of next year. And their factory is already up and running, so we can actually expect to see this model pretty quickly. It's going to come out and pretty much demolish that really top end market, competing with the S-Class, maybe the BMW 7 Series, maybe even a Rolls-Royce, like a lower end Rolls-Royce, who knows. Now this variant is gonna have about 1,080 horsepower. Let me tell you, when you get cars that are above 1,000 horsepower, those cars are basically like alien technology. 1,000 horsepower just a few years ago was essentially impossible. 15 years ago, I think there was only one car that had it. That was the Bugatti Veyron. And now we're seeing all these cars come out and have over 1,000 horsepower. Now it makes sense. They have a 113 kilowatt hour battery. Now, I have finally got the answer to how big the battery pack is. So if you watch my video about the Lucid Air that it stopped in the middle of the road, I talked about net capacity and gross capacity. Basically, the difference between them, I'll reiterate that, net capacity is how much energy is available to you, whereas gross capacity is the entire capacity of the battery pack. Now, I'm going to take the example of a Tesla here. The Model S has a gross capacity of 100 kilowatt hours, which means 100 kilowatt hours is the maximum amount of capacity you can actually pull out of the battery pack. Now, obviously, for longevity purposes, manufacturers, they limit how much you can actually charge all the way to 100% and limit how much you can actually drain. They add like a buffer at the top and bottom. And basically, with that buffer, you lose out some capacity. So the Model S net capacity is actually less. I think some people say it's about 93 kilowatt hours. Don't quote me on that. I don't actually know. But with the Lucid Air, the 113 kilowatt hour figure is net capacity. Their efficiency is going to be about 4.58 miles per kilowatt hour. And it's a simple calculation. You multiply 4.58 by 113 kilowatt hours. And what's the answer you get? You get 517 miles of range. By that, just looking at that, we know that the Lucid Air, the net capacity of the Lucid Air is gonna be 113 kilowatt hours, which makes total sense because the battery pack is actually bigger. It's bigger than 113 kilowatt hours, which means my guess is gonna be it's about 120 kilowatt hours, probably a bit more. And that makes a lot more sense as to how Lucid Air can get over 500 miles with not that much of a bigger battery pack than the Model S. Now, of course, if Tesla does that, they'll get a long enough range as well, but obviously this Lucid Air has some pretty good efficiency benefits, so there's that. Now, moving down the line, we got the Air Grand Touring. And with the Air Grand Touring, this is the one where you actually get the most amount of range. You get 517 miles of range, 800 horsepower. Will come next year in the summer sometime, and it'll cost less. It'll cost about $139,000. The Dream Edition, I forgot to quote the price on that, was $169,000. So there's a big price difference. And now there's the Air Touring with a smaller battery pack, and it's only gonna have a range of 406 miles and only have, I'm guessing, one motor at the back, rear wheel drive, and it's gonna be 620 horsepower. And this car will come out sometime in late 2021. Now by 2022, there's supposed to be another model called the Air, just simply called the Air, nothing after. And basically with that model, you're supposed to get somewhere, my guess would be above 300 miles of range. Of course, Lucid is probably going to do something great and maybe make it 350, maybe 400 even. But my guess would be you'll probably get at least 300 miles, and that would be basically a car that can kind of compete with other cars coming out today from the legacy automakers. And really, this car is going to have more range, faster charging speed on all of them. So the max charging speed is supposedly going to be 350 kilowatts. Now, the reason why I don't trust charging speed is for this reason. Let me try to explain. When cars charge faster, they have a higher charge rate, it is not sustained. So let's take the example of a Model 3. The reason why I want to take the Model 3 is because it has charging speeds of up to 250 kilowatts, but most of the superchargers today, they're still version 2, which means the max charge rate those can deliver is 150 kilowatts, whereas the car can accept all the way up to 250, which obviously Tesla's doing a great job at rolling them out. Now here's the thing. When you go from 150 to 250, that's a pretty big jump, 100 kilowatt jump. So that's a 67% improvement, but you're not actually going to get 67% reduction in time or even close to that figure. So what happens with the Model 3, for example, is at 250 kilowatt station, it will ramp up all the way to 250 kilowatts at around 10 or 11%, and then drop back down around 20, 25, even 30%, depending on how good your battery is. And so what happens is you're really only sustaining that for like a few minutes because the battery just instantly charges up to like pretty much 20-30% really quickly. So it's only just a few minutes, maybe even just 4 or 5 minutes. You sustain that and then it drops back down and starts to throttle pretty heavily. Now granted, it is quicker to charge Tesla at this version 3 supercharger compared to a version 2 supercharger, but the difference in time isn't that much. Now I'm going to take the example of an e-tron. E-tron max charging speed is only about 150 kilowatts, but what it can do is sustain that from pretty much dead empty 5-10% all the way up to like 80%, 150 kilowatts going straight through. Now part of that reason is because they use a different chemistry. Audi uses some weird chemistry, probably a lot of cobalt, which can accept all that current, and maybe the longevity is kind of sacrificed, but nonetheless that battery accepts pretty much 150 kilowatts going all the way. It's like a flat curve. It's not a curve, it's just a line. And basically what happens with that is the time that it takes to charge from say 10% to 80% is not that different from a Tesla charging at a 250 kilowatt station, because it has to throttle back down pretty quickly, and by around 60-70% it's probably at around 100 kilowatts, which is lower than what the Audi is charging at, but the Audi is still gaining that charge at a much higher rate. Now because of that, Bjorn Nyland, a Norwegian Tesla tuber, I think you can call it that way, he basically does tests with all these EVs, and basically what he found was in a 1,000 kilometer basically road trip test type of thing, he does that. He found that the Audi e-tron wasn't actually that different. In fact, it was probably just as quick, if not quicker, than a Model X. Now 350 kilowatts is basically, you can consider like a marketing scheme. Oh my gosh, you can pump all that power into the car right away, really quickly. Holy crap, this is gonna be amazing. When the reality is, obviously it will help in the like very beginning of the battery pack, going from say like 5% to 30%, maybe even 40%. It helps a lot, and I'm not going to deny that fact. But if you're say charging there for maybe 20-30 minutes, of course it doesn't matter as much as it matters how long can it sustain it. So that's the battery stuff aside. Now let's talk about the car itself. I didn't even get into that fact, which is probably one of the most important facts that we should actually be talking about. Simply said, I love the car. The look of the car is amazing. They also released, or actually showed, their Lucid Gravity or Project Gravity, which is actually supposed to be their SUV. The SUV kind of looks ugly, especially from the back. Even the actual sedan that they have kind of looks a bit not that well designed from the back. I don't know, I just don't like it from the back. And part of the reason I kind of get, because the back is actually not designed as like a traditional sedan. They tried to actually give more space for the passenger cabin, which actually helps out a lot, because now you can actually recline the seats and such, like an S-Class sort of thing. Overall, I really love the car. It's actually a really good car. I'm really looking forward to it. Now, there are parts that I don't like about the car. One of those is the interior, and I'm not talking about the back. The back looks amazing. Have you seen the back? It's amazing. I want to be chauffeured in that car. The back is where you want to be, and that proves that it's a luxury car. In an S-Class, in a Maybach, in a Rolls Royce, you do not want to be driving. You are not the driver. You want to be chauffeured around. You are the person sitting in the back seat, making those $1 million checks and whatever, signing those deals, making bank. That's what you want. And this car is pretty much going to fall into that category, and basically it's perfect. It fits right in there. The price range is right there. It's a luxury car, like a really high-end luxury car with good materials and whatnot. fits right in, and it is amazing. It's an EV option that those people can now have. If you're looking at an S-Class, you'll be like, oh, there's Lucid. Talking about the interior, I don't like the front. Now the front, here's the thing. Now the screen does actually come out, which obviously that's a cool gimmick, but the dashboard is actually laid out in a way that you can actually touch, and it's kind of curved to the driver, which is awesome. Kind of like the Porsche Taycan. They call it the floating design, something like that. I think it's a 5K display, so that's awesome. Right now it's LED. They want to get to OLED, which is obviously accepting new technologies. But to the right of the dash, the screen just follows out, and it's actually a touch screen. So touching that, you actually have to kind of like reach forward. Like you're just driving about like this, and now you're like, okay, let's touch something here. Now instead of just like, normal touch screen where you have everything, your controls, obviously the touch screen at the bottom, but that kind of feels a bit too low because then you have to literally take your eyes off and look down there. But like right there, even, of course you don't have to take your eyes off, but you have to be like this, like, okay, I'm touching stuff. So it's kind of weird that way. I don't really like that aspect of the design, but otherwise, obviously the cabin looks great. I'm guessing it's gonna ride like no other car. Now let's talk about the driver assist feature. So with all the sensor suite that you can actually get, which is optional, entirely optional. I need to reiterate that it's optional. All Teslas today come with their complete hardware installed. Even the cheapest Tesla Model 3, the $35,000 one, has all the cameras, has all the sensors and everything, and it has all the safety features built in. So you don't have to actually pay extra for the safety features. It's the convenience feature. So like autopilot, or like the FSD upgrade where it takes turns on city streets, but that's coming out later in the year. I don't know why I said that, but basically it changes lane on the highway, takes you to your interchanges, whatever, all that stuff. Convenience features is what Tesla charges, but they are charging you for the hardware just like classic legacy auto companies, which is sort of fine because they aren't as vertically integrated as Tesla, which is also not a bad thing, because the car is amazing. They'll probably produce it. They have a factory now. They're doing testing right now. So obviously they have a lot of ground to actually cover. Their software is where they actually have to put a lot of their effort on. With that software, they really have to get their self-driving out and about. So even with all the sensors, they are using LiDAR, which obviously Tesla has said, okay, they're not going to use for obvious reasons. They said, okay, it's not, first of all, it's really expensive, which makes sense why they're not actually including it on every single car. Tesla's going for a vision-based approach. Cameras aren't really that expensive when you're fitting hardware on them. So now you can take all those costs into account, but basically they're only gonna have level 3 autonomy, which is basically just driver assist. That is not autonomy. That doesn't mean where, like, not even going to sleep in the back of your car, where you can just relax. Like, you're there as a driver, but you can't just be like, ah, yeah, this is great. No, you actually have to be physically present, holding the wheel probably, and actually essentially help the car drive, which isn't really good because obviously in this sort of car, you want your self-driving features to be present much more than what you'd want in, like, say, a cheaper car, because you don't want to be driving this car. Do you want to pay for a chauffeur, or do you rather have the car drive itself? Now, obviously, car drive itself. And here's the thing, it'll have a maximum capability of level 3 autonomy. That is what they said, which means future upgrades, thrown out the window. Throw it completely out the window. At least that's what I think. Obviously, that doesn't take away from the car itself. The car is obviously amazing. The car segment is definitely gonna accept it. It's gonna be great. A lot of people are actually gonna buy that car. But that, they can't really call it autonomy. They can't really call it, that they're gonna be full self-driving, which I feel like it's just going to be common. It has to be common. In 10 years time, every company is going to have it, and if you're not striving for that, you're going to be left behind. Now, I know Lucid must be striving for it, right? They have level 3, or they're going to have level 3 autonomy on their car, so it's not like they're just completely giving up on it or anything like that. But even with software updates, you can't get level 5 autonomy. That kind of feels like it's a step in the wrong direction, at least to me. Because now Tesla has actually set the standard, right? For everyone who's following, they have set the standard. And if people just don't follow in their footsteps, for example, or anything like that, it's kind of, it feels incomplete, and it feels like you're getting a much inferior product than it might actually be. Now, there are some things that Lucid is doing great. Now, one of them is that they're basically following Tesla's exact plan from like 2008 or something like that. not exactly that exact plan. They're not actually doing the Roadster sort of vehicle. They're going directly to a Model S. Actually, they renamed the company. It was actually a different company name, and now it's, I think it was like Artesia or something like that. I'm not entirely sure, I forgot. So they do have experience building batteries and drivetrains and all that stuff. So that's not to say that they don't have any experience with this powertrain type of stuff. But they're following Tesla's footsteps, which is a good thing, because every other company, like a legacy auto company, should be doing this. They're producing their own batteries. They're actually gonna build like this Powerwall thingy. This car is gonna have this V2G, V2V, like vehicle to vehicle. Basically really good stuff. We're seeing some really good stuff by Lucid. And it's amazing that actually Tesla is actually getting some competition, which isn't really competition per se, because none of their cars actually compete, but we're getting another player in the market, which is great because Lucid also wants to drop in price eventually, and they want to produce 1 million vehicles by 2027. Think about how long it took Tesla to produce 1 million vehicles. They're still not here yet, and it took over 7 years, and they're only going to produce, what, 500,000 vehicles this year, predicted to be. So yeah, Lucid has a long way to cover, and I do feel like Lucid is going to be a relatively successful company. They're not exactly like Tesla. They're not building their own charging network. They're actually partnering up with Electrify America, so there's that. So yeah, there are some key differences, but overall, I feel like Lucid is following Tesla's footsteps, which is actually a right thing to do, because that's how you're going to actually go forward. You're going to grow and everything, and that's actually going to help them become a pretty big player in the market. The fact that they're late to the game doesn't matter as much. Think about more than 100 years ago, where automobile companies weren't really that common. Ford was like the only one that actually made really good automobiles that made them relatively cheap. Henry Ford made the Model T, basically for the common person to afford. And then we got a slew of other companies, like for example, General Motors. We got then Chrysler, Dodge, and all those, right? And obviously from other countries, we got like the Japanese brands, German brands, whatever. Pretty much a lot of innovation during that time. And it's the same thing here. The fact that they're late to the game isn't really a necessary downside. I think if we're talking in terms of 20, 30, 40, 50 years even, if Lucid can prove that this car, the Lucid Air, is a really good car and it actually sells in pretty big quantities, then I think their company will be a success, and they'll be here in like say 20, 30, 40, 50 years, and they'll actually be producing some really cheap or cheaper luxury cars. So they'll be like kind of like the Mercedes of what we have now, even though the world is going to be entirely different, because we're going to have autonomy, and it's not going to be you're not going to actually drive your own car. It might actually be illegal in 50 years to drive your own car. So you have to take all of that into account. But yeah, I do see them becoming a relatively big player in the market. I don't think they're going to stay niche for so long, maybe for the next decade, of course, but then eventually, as they get their production up, as they release some models that are actually cheaper in price and they actually spend more in R&D, I think that this company has a lot of potential, and I do think that they're actually going in the right direction, and that is always a good thing to see from a new company. And I feel like that Rivian, Lucid, those are the companies that are actually going to lead us into the future, rather than like Ford, GM, FCA, whatever. I'm talking about American brands right here. So yeah, that's my opinion. I do feel like most of the American brands are going to go bankrupt though. So like Ford is likely to go bankrupt. GM is very likely to go bankrupt. Did you see their deal with Nikola? Holy crap, I don't even want to talk about it. So yeah, there's that. This has been a very long video. I would like to thank you for watching, especially if you watched till the end. Possibly my longest video ever, but yeah, hope you enjoyed it. I really love talking about Lucid, and obviously trying to compare it and try to break the stereotype. Now, I don't want to be pessimistic about it. I love the company. I love the car, and the products are going to be pretty good. So I want to know what you guys think. What do you think is Lucid going to be? I already told you my thoughts. Now I want to hear from you. All right. So thank you for watching. Hope you enjoyed this one, and I will talk to you in the next one. All right. Peace.